So in graduate school, I originally was going to study the psychology of humor, but I switched and picked up morality. Once I began to focus on morality, then the big issue for me and for a lot of researchers was, where does it come from? And you can either say, well, it's from evolution, and Charles Darwin wrote about the origin of morality, or you can say it's from culture and look at the way all these cultures shape their children. And one side points to universalism. We all have the same evolved morality. The other points to diversity and difference, cross-cultural difference. And I love both those fields, evolution and anthropology, and I had just a strong intuition that both are right. There is a universal human nature, but it tunes up variably within cultures. And so it's like a lot of other things, like language is sort of like that. But the analogy that I ultimately settled on, a lot of people were working with language as the analogy, like that there's a moral language or moral grammar. But because I'm an intuitionist, because I was already coming to see that our gut feelings drive our reasoning, and you can see this in everybody else. You can certainly see it in your political opponents. It's hard to see in yourself, but you got to presume if everyone else is doing it, I'm probably doing it too. Post hoc reasoning to justify whatever we already believe. So, so I wrote that up in my dissertation research. I wrote about that, and then I wrote an article in Psychological Review, really going into how morality could be both evolved and variable, and the evolution is about how we evolved to have certain intuitions. So then I had to say, well, what are these intuitions? So that was my next project, and that became moral foundations theory. So I wanted to bridge. I wanted to look at like what are the elements of morality that you find around the world? It doesn't have to be in every culture, but it should be in most cultures. What are the elements of morality you find that are around the world that have a clear evolutionary basis, but also have cultural variability in how they're instantiated? And so the way that my thinking worked, so first I was drawing on, because there were a few theories of pluralism, of moral pluralism out there. Richard Schwader, my postdoc advisor, had a theory of 3 ethics: autonomy, community, divinity. Alan Fisk, one of my PhD advisors at Penn, had a theory about 4 relational models: communal sharing, authority ranking, equality matching, and market pricing. And these theories, they didn't quite match up. And there were a few others. So I sort of looked at all these. I did this work with Craig Joseph and said, well, where's there a clear story? And so, for example, care. So we care for others, especially vulnerable others. We care for our children. Obviously, this is innate. How could you have mammals without care? That's, our females have breasts to give milk and brains to care. And in humans, the male brain has that too. In a lot of other animals, they don't. But in humans, we fall in love with our children and we care for them. So care was absolutely in. Boy, that we're solid on that. You can't deny this is innate. But how do you care for your children? I mean, it's really different between Germany and Italy, to say nothing of, the West versus the East. So that's care. And then fairness. You'll never find a society that doesn't value fairness. And there was a great theory from Robert Trivers of reciprocal altruism, and we keep track of who's cheating us. So that's a really good candidate. So just going through this process, we came up with 5 that we thought were the best candidates. So they are care, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity or purity. And then since then we've added on a couple, because I don't care about parsimony. The world is complicated. I don't feel we need to reduce it to 1 or 2. So those 5. We've added on liberty, and I think property or possession is also one, because you find that in the animal species. They have evolved notions of territoriality. So there are a lot of these. I think of them as being like the taste buds of the moral mind.
Okay. It's hard for me. Did you really just spring this on the world? I mean, was it because it just seems so insightful and obvious? Or
Well,
did you bring it together from others,
yeah.
or how did
Well, as I understand it, research on inventions shows that if Bell hadn't invented the telephone, someone else would have gotten it 2 years later. If Gutenberg hadn't invented the printing press, there were dozens who were working on similar things. And in the same way, just as I said, so Rick Schwader had a theory of three, Alan Fiske had a theory of four, Franz de Waal had a theory of building blocks of morality in chimpanzees. So, people were playing with these ideas, and I just put them together. It may just be that I'm better at writing up my ideas and conveying them intuitively, because all these are good theories. They're all, really good for doing certain things. I was trying to come up with a theory that would help us really get inside other people's minds and be able to understand, if you go to a different culture, because originally this had nothing to do with politics. This was about culture. And I'd done some work in India, and that's where I came to understand notions of authority, respect, hierarchy, and notions of purity, sanctity, pollution. So once you understand, this is all part of the human equipment. It's just that some cultures develop bits of it, others develop other parts. You're much more sympathetic.